Arizona Territory, 1879. The bullet slammed into Silas Granger's side just before he hit the canyon floor, the world spinning in a blur of red rock and betrayal. He should have died. That was their plan, three of them, men he had once called brothers. They took his horse, his rifle, and his water. Left him bleeding in the sun-split silence of Bitterwind Canyon, where the hawks circled low and the rocks kept secrets. He crawled. For 2 days he dragged himself across stone and dust, teeth clenched against the pain. He did not shout for help. No one would have heard him. No one ever came to Bitterwind Canyon unless they meant for someone not to come back. But someone did come, on the dawn of the 3rd day, when the sun painted the cliffs in blood and gold. He saw her. A woman, slim and quiet, leading a mule piled with herbs and water skins. She moved with the sure steps of someone who belonged to the land. She saw him lying face down in the dirt, and for a moment she just stood there. Then she dropped to her knees beside him. "Do not close your eyes," she said. "You close them now, you will not open them again." Her voice was soft, not weak. She cut away his shirt, packed his wound with a bitter-smelling paste from her satchel, and gave him water, drop by drop, from a tin cup. He survived. It took days before he could sit up, weeks before he could walk. She stayed through it all. Her name was Briar Lovell. 22, with a quiet fire behind her eyes and a scar across her left hand that ran from wrist to palm. She lived alone in the hills with her 2 younger siblings, twins, both under 10, who had been left in her care after their parents died of fever 2 winters back. "You do not owe me anything," she said once, when he tried to stand too soon. "But if you want to get even with the ones who did this, you need to heal first." He did not speak much then. Couldn't really. His ribs were cracked, his lung had been grazed, but he watched her. The way she moved through the cabin she had built with her own hands. The way she brushed the twins' hair and stitched their shirts and sang to them when they had bad dreams. She was strong, not loud about it, not proud, just steady. Silas had seen women who broke under less. He had seen men who did too. "You are lucky," said the girl June, the louder twin, one night, peering up at him as he sat by the fire. "Briar never brings nobody home, not even when she found Jacob in that flash flood." "Jacob was already dead," said Briar, setting down a pan of beans. June nodded solemnly. "That is why you are lucky." Silas could not argue with that. He stayed, at first because he had nowhere else to go, then because he did not want to be anywhere else. By the 3rd week he was chopping kindling. By the 5th he was helping mend the roof. The 6th he kissed her. It was not planned. Just a moment late one evening when the twins were asleep and the desert wind moved through the cottonwoods like a whispered hymn. She had been brushing her hair by the fire. He reached out, touched her cheek with his scarred hand. She looked at him, eyes soft, searching. "You are not the man they left in the canyon," she said. He kissed her then, slow, careful, like something sacred. And she kissed him back. He told her everything after that, about the 3 men who rode with him out of Prescott, a silver job that turned into a setup. About the lies, the ambush, the shot to his side, and how he heard them laughing as they rode off. "They thought I would die slow," he said, voice low. "That no one would ever find me." Briar's mouth tightened. "Then they were wrong," he nodded. "I am going back." Her gaze didn't waver. "To kill them? No." He looked toward the canyon wall outside the door. "To burn every lie they ever built, to tear down the town that protects men like them. Prescott is a big place. I am not going to Prescott." She tilted her head. "They are not in Prescott anymore. They are in White Bluff." Her face went still. "That is 2 days' ride, and full of worse men than the ones who left you to die." "I know." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "You will not go alone." "Briar, you are not going alone, Silas." He stared at her. "You have your siblings. Your home." "My home is where I say it is," she said, "and they are not losing anyone else to men like that." He reached for her hand. She did not pull back. "What about the twins?" he asked. "They are coming. We will make it a journey. 2 adults, 2 children. No one will suspect anything." "Suspect what?" She looked him straight in the eye. "That we are going to burn their world down." He laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was the first time he had felt alive since before the canyon. She smiled when he laughed, and something shifted between them. Like they had both been waiting for the same thing without knowing it. They left 2 days later. Silas rode a borrowed mule, still stiff in the saddle. Briar rode beside him, rifle strapped across her back, her eyes always scanning the horizon. June and Jonah, her quiet twin brother, sat in the back of the wagon, eating dried apples and whispering to each other like it was all some grand adventure. They reached White Bluff by dusk on the 3rd day. And Silas Granger, left to die in the canyon, stepped into the town that had turned its back on justice. Not to beg, not to plead, but to set it right. And beside him, Briar Lovell, who had pulled him from the edge of death and given him something worth fighting for, something worth living for. The road into White Bluff wound through dust and silence. No one spoke as they approached. Briar held the reins, her eyes fixed ahead, while Silas sat beside her, jaw tight. Jonah rode in the back, a hand resting protectively over the small wooden box he'd carved for his marbles. June picked at a loose thread on her hem, watching the road with wide, curious eyes. White Bluff rose from the basin like a scab that refused to heal sun-blanched boards, a sagging church steeple, and a saloon that leaned into the street like it had secrets to whisper. "Where do they hole up?" Briar asked, voice low. Silas didn't look at her. "The saloon, upstairs rooms. They always liked being above things they thought they owned." They rolled in slow, the mules' hooves clapping against packed earth. Townsfolk watched from behind shutters and beneath brims. No one greeted them. They stopped at the livery first. An older man with a hitch in his step came out, wiping his hands on a wool apron. "Passing through?" he asked, eyes darting to the children. "Looking for a room," Briar said. "Maybe some work if any's going." He nodded toward the far end of town. "Miss Alcott takes in boarders. She's got a spare loft above her bakery, bit warm but clean." "We'll take it," Briar said. They left the wagon and mule in his care and walked together, keeping the children between them. Miss Alcott turned out to be a widow with flour-dusted sleeves and a face that had weathered grief without surrender. She offered them the loft for a few coins and a promise to help with the ovens come morning. As dusk bled down the sky, Briar and Silas stood at the edge of the loft, watching the saloon's lights flicker on one by one. "You recognize the horses?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, "That gray gelding tied out front, that was Micah's. He used to brag it could outrun a train." "Always talk too much," she nodded. "You want to go in now?" "Not yet. They won't be drunk enough, not careless." She leaned back against the wall, folding her arms. "You ever kill a man sober?" He met her eyes. "Yes." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded once and went back to watching the street. The next morning, Briar helped knead dough before dawn while the twins swept the bakery floor. Silas slipped out early, hat down low, coat hiding the revolver he'd cleaned the night before. He didn't go to the saloon. Not yet. First, he walked the length of the town, slow and deliberate. He noted every alley, every gate left ajar, every door with a broken hinge. He counted windows above the storefronts and watched who came and went, who kept their heads down and who met his gaze with something like warning. At the far end of town sat a smithy, cold this early. He stood there a moment, then turned and made his way back. When he returned, Briar was rolling dough, forearms dusted in flour. "Micah's still here," he said. "So's Dane, but I haven't seen the third." She didn't glance up. "He'll show. Men like that always think they're safe where they've settled." He leaned against the doorframe. "You ever done this before?" "Helped someone get even," he nodded. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him. "Once. A man hit his wife so long and hard she forgot her own name. Sheriff wouldn't touch it, said she must have deserved it. So I waited till he passed out drunk behind the feed store, hit him with a stone and dragged him to the river. He woke up halfway under, but no one heard him over the current." Silas didn't speak, just looked at her with something that wasn't surprise. She picked up another ball of dough. "Sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge." That night they watched again. This time 3 horses stood out front. "The third's here," Silas said. Briar glanced at the saloon. "Then tomorrow we start pulling the threads." He turned toward her. "We do it quiet. Let the town see what's underneath when the polish gets scraped off." She gave a short nod. "You take Micah. I'll handle Dane." He frowned. "You sure?" She looked at him evenly. "You're not the only one who knows how to end things." The next day, she went to the dry goods store where Dane played cards in the back every afternoon. She didn't speak to him. Just stood near the door long enough for him to notice her face, the same face that had been beside Silas at the canyon's edge, though Dane hadn't seen it then. He sat up straighter, eyes narrowing. That evening he didn't go to the saloon. He followed her. Silas waited in the alley beside the bakery, his revolver resting against his thigh. When Dane turned the corner, Briar stepped in front of him. "You remember Bitterwind?" she asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, then the click of Silas's hammer behind him. "You left me for dead," Silas said. Dane turned slowly. "Silas, I don't want your lies." Briar didn't reach for her weapon. She didn't have to. Dane's eyes darted between them. "I didn't fire the shot," he said. "It was Micah. I told him it was wrong." "You rode away," Silas said. That was enough. Dane took a step back, but the alley ended in a wall. "You can run," Briar said softly, "but we'll find you again. Or you can walk into that saloon tomorrow, tell everyone what you did, and watch how fast the town turns on you." He stared at her like she was something he didn't understand. Silas stepped aside. "Go." Dane didn't speak. He just walked out, shoulders hunched, as the first rain in weeks began to fall, turning the dust to mud beneath his boots. Later, as the thunder rolled low across the flats, Silas and Briar sat beneath the awning of the bakery, watching lightning dance along the far ridge. "You think he'll talk?" she asked. "He'll run first, but someone will ask why, and when they do, he won't lie. Not well." She reached for his hand. "Tomorrow we finish it." His fingers closed around hers, firm and steady. "Tomorrow," he said. The morning broke gray and close, clouds hanging low over the rooftops like the sky hadn't yet decided what to do with itself. Silas rose before the church bell called the town to breakfast, strapping on the revolver and slipping the long knife Briar had honed for him the night before into his boot. He didn't eat. There was nothing in him that felt like chewing. Downstairs, the bakery was already warm with the scent of rising dough. Briar stood at the window, her braid pulled low, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She didn't turn when he stepped in. "You'll go through the back," she said. "Stairs are narrow behind the saloon kitchen. They won't expect anyone to come up them." "I know," he said. She wiped her hands on a cloth and faced him. Her eyes were steady, but her voice had rough edges. "I want you to be sure. This won't be like the alley. This is the end of it. I've been sure since they left me bleeding with the sun in my eyes." She nodded. "Then don't hesitate." "I won't." She stepped closer, reached for his coat lapel like she meant to brush away flour, but her fingers lingered. "I won't let Jonah and June out of the loft until it's finished." He covered her hand with his. "You're not sending me in there alone. I'll be outside. If anything goes wrong, I'll draw them out." His mouth tightened. I don't want them near you. They already were. He didn't argue. They both knew the line had been crossed the moment he'd bled out on Canyon Rock, and she'd bent beside him with herbs and grit and fire in her jaw. She pulled the latchkey from her apron pocket and dropped it into his hand. Back door's got a rusted hinge halfway up. Push left when it sticks. He held her gaze. When this ends, I'm not leaving. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. She gave a single nod. Then come back to me. By mid-morning, the saloon had filled with men who had nowhere else to be. Cards slapped against tables, chairs scraped, cheap whiskey poured. The piano sat silent. Its player had left for Tucson a month earlier, and no one had missed the music. Silas slipped through the alley with his coat collar up and his hat low. He found the back door and pushed left when it caught. The stairs creaked under his boots. He moved slow, hand on the revolver, listening. He knew Micah's voice before he reached the landing. Loud and raspy, always needing to be the one talking, like silence might give someone else a chance to matter. And I told him, if you can't ride, you ain't worth the feed. Left him there and took the saddle. He weren't gonna need it. Laughter followed. Another voice joined in. That was Clay, the third man. Clay hadn't been seen the day before, but he was here now, which meant all the pieces had fallen into place. Silas stepped into the hall. 3 doors. One cracked open, smoke curling out. He moved to the side, peered through. Micah sat with his back to the window, boots propped. Clay leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The third seat was empty. He didn't wait. He kicked the door open hard and had the revolver leveled before either man moved. Clay went for his belt but froze when Silas cocked the hammer. Micah blinked, mouth open. The color drained from his face. "You're dead," he said. Silas stepped inside, shut the door behind him. "You made sure of that, or thought you did?" Micah rose, hands out. "It wasn't personal. We had to. Don't lie." "You'd have done the same." "No," Silas said. "I'd have looked you in the eye." Clay shifted beside the bed. "You gonna shoot us in cold blood?" "I should. But I didn't crawl out of that canyon just to put a bullet in men who already rot from the inside." Micah's hands trembled. "Then what do you want?" "I want everyone to know what you did. I want the sheriff to hear it, and the banker you lied to, and every man you ever played cards with. You're going to walk downstairs and tell them." Clay laughed once, short and bitter. "You think they'll care?" Silas stepped forward. "They will when they see what you are. When a man like me comes back from the dead to tell it." Micah's voice cracked. "You don't have proof. Don't need it. Just need your fear." He turned the revolver, handed it to Clay. "But first, you're going to walk ahead of me, slowly. No sudden moves. You try to run, I won't hesitate." Clay took the weapon with a shaking hand. Micah didn't move. Silas looked at him. "Get up." Downstairs, the saloon fell quiet when they descended. Chairs scraped back. A man at the bar lowered his glass. Silas spoke loud enough for all to hear. "These 2 left me in Bitterwind Canyon. Took my horse, my rifle, and thought I'd be dead by sundown." Gasps rippled. Someone at the back cursed under his breath. Micah shifted. "It wasn't like that." Silas cut him off. "You say it wasn't, but you never came back, never told the law. Never sent a word. You just rode on like I was already buried." Several men stood now. One of them, a wiry fellow with a tin badge strung around his neck, stepped forward. "That true?" Clay didn't answer. Micah swallowed hard. "We thought he was dead. You didn't check." Micah looked down. The man with the badge turned to Silas. "You want justice?" Silas shook his head. "I already got it." He turned and walked out, leaving the silence behind him. Briar waited across the street, arms crossed, rifle slung at her back. When she saw him, she stepped forward, met him halfway. "Done?" she asked. "They'll never outrun it." She studied his face. "You didn't kill them?" "No." "Why?" "Because men like that fear shame more than death." She looked toward the saloon. "You're right." The wind kicked up dust between them. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. "They're not worth any more of you," she said. "They won't get it." They walked back together past the livery, past the bakery. The twins waited on the steps, hands clasped. "Is it over?" June asked. Briar crouched beside her. "Yes." Jonah looked at Silas. "You're staying now." Silas glanced at Briar. "If you'll have me." Briar didn't answer with words. She leaned into him, quiet and certain, her hand still in his. And there, on that dusty street with thunder rolling off toward the distant hills, Silas Granger found what he hadn't dared to hope for when he'd clawed his way up from the rocks of Bitterwind Canyon. A future. A home. And a woman who had stood beside him, not just through pain, but into whatever came after. The rains held for 3 days after the reckoning in White Bluff, soaking the earth until the gullies wept and the wagon wheels sank deep in the softening roads. The town quieted. Micah and Clay disappeared before the second nightfall, their names whispered like a bad taste folks didn't want to swallow twice. No one stopped them. No one asked where they were headed. Silas and Briar stayed, not out of necessity but choice. She took up the ovens again, rising before dawn to shape loaves and feed the fire. The townspeople came warily at first. Coins slid across the counter without looking her in the eye, but bread was bread, and word spread that it was better now than it had ever been under Miss Alcott's hands. Silas worked at the livery, easing the limp in the old stableman's stride with a quiet offer to muck stalls and break a new colt that no one else would touch. He never raised his voice, never asked for more than a fair share of coin, and kept his back to the saloon. One evening, Briar found him in the small yard behind the bakery, mending a gate hinge with a rusted nail and a rock for a hammer. She leaned against the post, arms folded, watching him work in the fading light. "You could have left," she said, "after they ran." After it was done, he finished tapping the nail into place and stood. "I thought about it, but I didn't want to ride away from something honest." She looked past him, to where the twins were playing in the dirt with smooth stones, building little fences and knocking them over. "I never meant to stay in White Bluff longer than a season. Only came for a trade route. Never thought I'd raise them here." "You still don't have to," he said. Briar turned to face him. "You offering something different, I'm offering what I've got. A steady hand, a back that's used to labor. And I want to build something that holds." She didn't answer right away. The wind stirred the edge of her skirt against her boots, and the scent of yeast still clung to her sleeves. "I've never known a man to offer building over burning. You never met me before the canyon." "I didn't need to," she said. "I saw what rose after it." He stepped closer, not touching her, not pressing, just near enough for warmth to pass between them. "I thought vengeance would be enough," he said, "but it wasn't. It got me even, but it didn't make me whole." "What did?" He didn't look away from her. "You." Her gaze held his, level and clear. "I don't do halfway, Silas. I wouldn't ask you to." She reached up, brushed the edge of dirt from his cheek with the back of her fingers. "Then I think we've got something worth holding on to." That night, they shared a blanket on the loft floor, the fire below keeping the room warm. Jonah and June slept in the corner, curled together under their patchwork quilt, the sound of their breathing soft and even. Briar lay with her head against Silas's shoulder, her hand resting over the spot where the canyon wound had hardened into a twisted seam. "You still ache," she whispered. "Only when it storms. I've got a salve that helps." "I've got you," he said. She didn't reply, just fit herself closer, and for the first time in years she let herself sleep through the night without waking at every wind against the shutters. Come morning, the sky cleared. The clouds moved east, and the ground dried just enough for the wagon ruts to harden. Silas hitched the mule and loaded the back with sacks of flour and wrapped loaves. They drove out past the edge of town, where the land stretched open and the air smelled of creosote and sage. At the first homestead, Briar handed a bag of bread to a woman with a squalling infant on her hip. The woman blinked, surprised. "What's this for?" "Start of a trade route," Briar said. "I'll come every week." Didn't think anyone from White Bluff had time to look out this far. "We're not from White Bluff," Silas said. They moved on, wagon creaking, sun climbing. At each stop, someone new met them with a wary face and left them with a softer one. By the time the sun dipped low, half the wagon was empty, and the other half was filled with small trades eggs, a bolt of muslin, a jar of pickled carrots. They returned at dusk, the twins sleepy in the back, their fingers sticky with honey from a jar gifted by a beekeeper's widow. As Silas lifted Jonah down, the boy leaned into him without a word. Briar watched from the porch, her eyes unreadable. Later, once the children were tucked in, she poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed him one. "You did well today," she said. "I didn't say much." "You didn't need to," he blew on the coffee. "You always know what folks need." "No," she said. "Just learn to listen when they don't say it." Silas glanced at her over the rim. "And what am I not saying?" She set her mug down. "That you want to stay for good." He didn't argue. "You'd be all right with that." Briar walked to him, took the cup from his hands and set it beside hers. "You're not just a man who came back," she said. "You're a man who stayed." Then she reached up, placed her hand at the back of his neck, and kissed him slow, with the weight of everything they hadn't said pressed between them. And Silas knew, as the wind moved over the eaves and the house settled around them, that the fire he'd once carried for vengeance had turned to something else, something solid, rooted deep. He hadn't come back to burn their town. He'd come back to build a life, and he wasn't doing it alone. The wildflowers came late that spring, pushing up through the riverbanks and in the ditches where the wagon wheels had churned the soil soft. Briar noticed them first, stooping to gather a few stems of golden yarrow and purple vetch, as she and Silas walked the trail south of White Bluff with the twins trailing behind, skipping stones into the shallow creek. She handed the bundle to Silas without a word. He tucked them carefully into his vest, the petals brushing against the linen as they continued on. The sky had turned that high blue that only came after rain, clean and wide, with hawks wheeling in the thermals and the scent of juniper lifting from the hillsides. "You think you'll miss it?" Briar asked. He kept his eyes on the trail. "You mean the fight?" "No, the drifting." He shook his head. "I used to think I couldn't stay anywhere long, like the ground would shift under me if I got still. But I was just looking for the right place to root." She didn't answer right away, just reached out and laced her fingers through his. By summer, the bakery had doubled its trade. A second oven had been built with help from the blacksmith and a stonemason who'd come through town looking for work. Briar paid him in sacks of flour and a place to sleep in the shed out back. He left 2 weeks later with a repaired wagon and a full pack, tipping his hat to the twins as he rode out. Silas had taken to shoeing horses, his hands calloused in new ways, his shoulders stronger now that they carried more than his own weight. He'd built a lean-to beside the livery to work beneath when the sun got too sharp. Some days he came home with coal dust in his hair and grease under his nails. Briar would pull the basin out to the porch and wash his hands herself, sleeves rolled, her laughter low and warm in the dusk. One evening, as the last of the sourdough cooled on the windowsill and the twins practiced their letters by lantern light, Silas brought in a carved box wrapped in oilcloth. Briar looked up from the table. "What's that?" He set it down and unwrapped it, revealing a small wooden case with brass hinges. "I traded for this with the tinsmith. Been working on it evenings." She opened it slowly. Inside lay a set of measuring spoons, each carved by hand from desert ironwood, polished until they gleamed. The grains swirled like smoke. She touched the largest one. These are beautiful. I wanted you to have something that's yours. For the work you do that don't get noticed. She closed the lid gently and looked at him. You notice. I try. That night, after the twins were asleep, they sat on the porch with their feet bare and a quilt pulled over their laps. The moon rose full and pale above the ridgeline, and the cottonwoods whispered like they did when the wind came down off the mesa. I've been thinking, she said, about building a smokehouse. We could cure meat, store more for winter, maybe even trade. Silas nodded. I could help with that. Sell some at the next fair in Wilcox. And maybe a second wagon. Jonah's nearly big enough to help drive. He smiled, eyes fixed on the horizon. You're not slowing down. She leaned against his shoulder. I've been still long enough. It's time to build forward. He kissed the top of her head. Then we'll build it together. Late August brought word from Prescott. A letter carried by a traveling preacher, addressed to Silas in a hand he didn't recognize. It was from a man named Harrow, who'd once ridden with Micah before things soured between them. The letter was short. Micah had been spotted in Las Cruces, broke and drunk, trying to sell a saddle with someone else's initials branded on it. Silas folded the letter and burned it in the stove. Briar watched the smoke lift. You going after him? No. He's already lost more than I ever could have taken. She reached for the kettle. Then let it stay burned. That autumn, they cleared the back lot where the scrub had taken hold. It took 3 afternoons and 2 borrowed axes, but by the end of it, they had enough space for a dozen hens, a proper garden bed, and a bench beneath the cottonwood where Silas carved in the evenings. The twins painted the hen house in uneven strokes, blue and green, with a crooked sun on the side. On the first frost morning, Silas came in from the yard with a ring. No diamond, just a braided band of silver and copper shaped by his own hand. He knelt beside Briar as she poured coffee. I don't have land. Not yet. And I don't have a family name that means anything, but I've got this. And I've got you if you'll have me. She set the pot down and looked at him longer than needed, but not longer than true. You already have me. They married beneath the cottonwood with the preacher who'd brought the letter standing between them. The townsfolk came with pies and jars of preserves. The blacksmith played fiddle, and June wore a crown of sagebrush and wild rose she'd made herself. That night, after the lanterns dimmed and the last of the cider was poured, Briar and Silas stood in the doorway of their home, the scent of wood smoke thick in the air. I didn't think I'd get this, he said. She traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. You didn't get it. You built it. He pulled her close then, and she let herself rest fully in his arms, no weight held back. They stayed in White Bluff. Winter came, and the river froze in places where the current slowed. The smokehouse filled. The second wagon was finished by February. By spring, they had a third mouth to feed, a daughter, born quiet with a full head of dark hair and eyes shaped just like Briar's. They named her Mercy, for what had been given instead of taken. Years passed. The bakery grew. The trade route reached past Wilcox and into the edge of New Mexico. Jonah left at 19 to apprentice with a blacksmith in Tucson, and June began teaching letters to ranch hands who'd never learned. Silas built a bigger porch. Briar kept her spoons. And on quiet nights when the wind came soft through the mesquite, they still sat side by side, fingers laced, watching the stars wheel above the desert they'd made their own. They had known the canyon, the pain, the loss, the edge of death. But they had chosen the trail forward, together. And they never looked back.